The KOFB studio presents Milk Crates and Turntables, a music discussion podcast hosted by Scott McLean with his co-host Jack Calabrese. Now, let's talk music. Enjoy the show.
I can't hear you.
Here I am.
There you are.
All right. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to start this all over again because this is a podcast and I can edit it. So I'm knocking you out again. Hold on. Everybody watching, this is what's live. So I'm going to knock you off so I can do an edit for this for the podcast. So hold on. I'm going to keep you on.
The KOFB studio presents Milk Crates and Turntables, a music discussion podcast hosted by Scott McLean with his co-host Jack Calabrese. Now, let's talk music. Enjoy the show.
All right, we're back again. Thank you, Amanda, for that wonderful introduction as usual. This is Milk Crates and Turntables. I'm your host, Scott McLean. On the screen for the live streamers, I have my great friend, my co-host, the one, the only, the sublime. I'm not doing that again. The producer makes me build you up, and I'm not going to do it. Mr. Jack Calabrese. But
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. Let me get this out. So right now we're streaming live over Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitch. If you want to get in touch with the show, email us at milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com. That's milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com. Give us show suggestions, advice on podcasting. You can correct us. Send us show, if you have any show ideas. We're all ears or eyes when it comes to emails. So let us know what you think. If you like the podcast, subscribe, like it, comment. We're streaming on every podcast platform there is. So again, without further ado, let me bring on my buddy, the extremely knowledgeable Jack Calabrese.
Hey!
That's you, buddy.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Down here in sunny Florida, I was in the pool today. The water was 85 degrees.
I have a pool. It's in my basement right now. It's been raining all day.
Yeah, it's called a sup pump, buddy. Get a sup pump.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need those in South Florida. So
I got one.
Okay, so let's get right to it. This week, our episode is Led Zeppelin, the one, the only. So how we do this on this show is usually we have a topic and it's a list. You know, Jack has his list of whatever on the topic. I do too. But this is our first basic, like zeroing in on a particular band. So let me jump off on this and start it out with. So Led Zeppelin is of course a legendary group. Now on this, we're not going to discover. There's not going to be any great Led Zeppelin discoveries in this episode. I don't think we're going to mention anything that hasn't been talked about over the last 40 years. But we're going to have opinions, and that's what makes a good podcast, I think. You know, we could be fact-based and all that. I think, and we are in a sense. there's a particular thing about Led Zeppelin that I find interesting is I think they were a little confused. I think Led Zeppelin was confused. I think they confused writing songs with arranging other people's songs and giving themselves a writing credit. They were great arrangers. John Paul Jones, the bass player, the quietest one in the band, is probably what he is a key to that band. He was an amazing arranger, music arranger.
Yep.
And he had a lot to do with him and Jimmy Page. But I think
it's one of the ways the band was formed. Jimmy Page coming out of the Yardbirds, so session musician. And then actually, even I think before joining the Yardbirds, he actually did some session work with John Paul Jones, who was helping with the arranging even back then. And that was kind of part of the genesis of that band.
He helped John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page actually arranged Donovan's Sunshine Superman together.
Yeah.
So they had worked, and when he heard that Page was starting a new band, he jumped right on the.
He said, "Whatever your next project is, I want in."
And evidently, Page's answer was, "I'll get back to you. I got to find a lead singer first."
Yeah, which is true. And prior to that, Page, like a lot of people don't know, and I can't cite the specific songs, but Page, did a lot of session work, including for The Who. He actually played guitar on some of those Who records, just uncredited.
Well, that's something that we might get into a little later. Pete Townsend, not a big fan.
A lot of those guys weren't. A lot of those guys weren't. You know what? I got to tell you, Zeppelin is a band that I love on one hand and loathe on the other hand.
So you ended last week's show with the comment. When I said this week's show will be Led Zeppelin, you basically yelled out like a banshee. Overrated
band. You know what? Come on. Look, you and I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, and it was Led Zeppelin. I mean, it's all you ever heard. It was, they were on the radio constantly, and they were by far regarded as the biggest, baddest, best band, best drummer, best bass player, best lead singer, best guitar player. Just too much. And, I think that epitomizes the band. They were just too fucking much.
But, why is that? Why do you think?
Because they were really good.
Yeah, they were good at their chosen field, as Pete Townsend put it. But how good were they really? Like, okay, what made them good? So, John Bonham, if you want to talk about, I'm not going to say he's overrated, but he's widely thought of as the best drummer ever. Right?
He's a phenomenal drummer.
So I'm gonna read a quote from the one and only Keith Richards. Okay, so see, today was one of those days. So let me get my so Keith Richards quoted as saying, "As a band, I think they were aptly named. They never took off musically, at least to me. Bonham was a powerhouse drummer, although I think he was heavy-handed. That's where the lead comes in. But to cut the story short, Led Zeppelin is Jimmy Page." And he says, "I love Jimmy Page, but Zeppelin as a band, no." He's quoted as saying, "With John Bonham thundering down the highway in an uncontrolled 18-wheeler, he had cornered the market there. And Jimmy's a brilliant player, but I always felt there was something a little hollow about it, All right, that's Keith Richards.
So yeah, but what? I'm telling you, a lot of those guys, Mick Jagger, no real love for Led Zeppelin. Pete Townsend, I think the quote that I read from Pete Townsend said, "I love those guys. Individually, they're all beautiful players." He was like, "But I just never really got them." You might
So
actually have the correct quote, but
I'm going to tell you. So let's get into that. Let's get into what Pete Townsend said about them. So Pete Townsend says, I don't like a single thing they've done. I hate to even be slightly compared to them. I just never ever liked them. And that's a real problem for me because as people, I think they are really, really great guys. I just never liked the band. I just got a block to them because they became bigger than the Who in so many ways in their chosen field, but I've never liked them. And then any chance he got to take a shot at them. So he delivered the inaugural lecture for the John Peel lecture in 2011. Now, John Peel was a British DJ, record producer, journalist. He just
huge
was
influencer.
the man. He was the man, right?
Yeah.
In Britain. So when Townsend was given that lecture, he saw another opportunity to throw Zeppelin under the bus when he said, did John Peel really give Led Zeppelin their big break? I can't see it myself. I don't give a shit about making money. I think rock music is junk. I'm a genius. The Who were okay, but without me, they would have all ended up working in the flower market or worse, in Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Not a big fan. Not a big fan.
Look, I'm not sure. Look, calling them overrated is probably a little bit harsh. I mean, again, they dominated, the '70s in terms of hard rock. I mean, these guys were playing to, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people at a time. But to me, part of the problem that I had was they got so big and so overblown. I think that they were the partial inspiration to the punk movement, where people were just like, enough already. And then in terms of, and I know that this is not gonna jive with popular opinion, and most people love Jimmy Page as a guitar player, and I think he is a brilliant studio guitar player. I think he was an amazing arranger, working with John Paul Jones. I think he knew how to do multi-tracks. He was magical in the studio, and he was a great writer, and he was a great writer of music. He was an okay live guitar player. He was sloppy.
Oh, he was. I mean, there was something about him. He would play these like they were almost the predecessor to rock, prog rock. With they started getting into these long, in concert, these long 15-minute, and he would make, he'd make these mistakes. He'd make chord mistakes.
Yeah.
With the attitude of like, oh, I'm going to be playing for another 12 minutes. I'll fix it later.
Well,
Who cares?
you also have to remember that a lot of that time he was on heroin.
Well, Keith Richards, but the way Keith Richards did it, he could be sloppy, but there was something edgy about him doing it. Jimmy Page had some kind of an arrogance to it. It's like he was trying to impress the girl in the front row,
But
So-
that was one of the other problems that I had with Led Zeppelin. They had an arrogance about them. They had a mystique about them. I mean, and it still continues to this day. People adore Led Zeppelin. People are still buying their albums, buying their T-shirts. There are even some goofballs that are buying Led Zeppelin pinball machines.
What? Don't, you mean the one that's right behind me in my studio? Led Zeppelin 3, or as I call it, the original Unplugged.
The original Unplugged, absolutely. But what? I'll tell you, give credit where credit is due. Most people don't realize. They look at Led Zeppelin because they've had such longevity, because they have been so popular for so long, and for audiences popular pretty much right out of the gate. You have a tendency to forget that they were only around for 12 years. They were only around 12 years, but those guys were powerhouses. And again, you and I keep kind of returning to the same theme. They were a working band, especially in the early days. I mean, they put out Led Zeppelin in January of '69. They put out Led Zeppelin 2 in October of '69.
Yeah.
Those are two brilliant, brilliant records, and they put them out in the same friggin' year.
But how many of those? So I want to touch on something. So one of our viewers just chatted in, Suzanne, about Pete Townsend kind of bashing Zeppelin, and she basically said threatened, as in, Pete Townsend felt threatened by them. I don't think anybody on this fucking earth, any guitar player, could ever threaten Pete Townsend or make him feel insecure or make him. I just don't think that it's possible. I think Pete Townsend is a better guitar player than Jimmy Page, personally. I think he's a better songwriter than Jimmy Page. I think the Who got overshadowed by them because of Led Zeppelin had a great publicity machine. Their tour manager was an animal. Their manager in general was an animal.
Their manager, Peter Grant,
he was an animal. I mean,
he was an animal and resorted to physical violence and carried guns and all of that. But I think that's.
But I don't think Pete Townsend of the Who. I think John Bonham is over. Keith Moon is a much more technical drummer than Bonham, and Pete Townsend knows that. I mean, Keith Moon has fill. You can hear the fills in his drumming.
Yeah.
Whereas Bonham is just like, you could say Bonham and Neil Peart are cut from the same cloth.
I don't know.
No, I shouldn't say that. No, because Neil Peart is very technical also.
I don't know. To me, the way that I would describe it is, I think that Bonham was technical in that he didn't really stray too far out from, playing drums kind of straightforward, where Keith Moon was far, far more dynamic and pushed the boundaries and was just out and out wild. And Neil Peart, whole different story. I mean, just incredible drummer, infused a lot of jazz, and he had a lot of different influences, not to mention the 100 different drums that he actually had. I think the thing that made John Bonham the special drummer was that he drove that band's sound with, you might call it heavy-handedness, but that was the thing that gave that band that thunder.
One of our viewers chatted in, Bob, who says Keith Moon was a mess as a drummer. It was awesome, but not technical. I think you're wrong. I don't think his mess was brilliant.
It was brilliant, but what do you mean by technical? So I mean, and that's what I mean. Like John,
he knew the fills. He knew how to fill in there. Where Bonham's just like that heavy, that just the straight ahead drummer. Keith Moon was kind of like, in the sense, not a jazz drummer, but I mean, they had two totally different styles. Keith Moon was faster. He was always moving from drums. It's just his drumming was different, but I just think he had more flair to it. I think he had more.
Yeah, but more flair doesn't equate to technical.
Not flair in the sense of showmanship.
Yeah.
Flair in the sense of musicianship.
No question about it. And by the way, what is it about drummers that, both of them ended up killing themselves with alcohol? Now, Bonham actually died, of asphyxiation. The story supposedly was that he drank 40 shots of vodka while he was staying at Jimmy Page's place and fell asleep and, threw up and choked on it and whatnot. And Keith Moon, technically, he didn't die of alcohol. He was actually on some medication to curb his alcoholism. He went out to see the Buddy Holly story with Paul McCartney had a party, and he went out there and was trying not to drink, but everybody wanted him to be Keith Moon. And he ended up drinking, I think, some. But what ended up happening with him, I think they said that they found 26 of those pills in his belly. He was just, but what is it about the drummers that they just can't keep their shit together, man?
They're a different breed. They're a different breed of person, man. They're a different breed of person. But yeah, I don't think that Led Zeppelin's overrated. I mean, 4 to 500 million album sales says, that they're not overrated. I think if you really break them down, for the average music fan, they're dynamite. They're the top of the heap. But if you look a little deeper into it, again, they've been called lazy, actually, by people in the business because of their lack of songwriting, as far as all those Delta blues songs that they just took. Now they gave credit later on, or they stole the idea from it. What was it? There was one song that they did. They took from one of these Delta blues guys. I shouldn't start a story I don't have the facts on, but the gist of it was they went on tour. The guy went on tour with them, and then the next album, Jimmy Page wrote this. Came up with this riff, and it was almost identical to this. This Delta blues guy, and
well, they have there's a couple of stories.
And then he said, I never heard that song before, and I've never heard this guy before. I mean, blatantly lied about it.
I mean, they just went through the whole lawsuit where their lawyers were better than the guys from. So the band was called Spirit. If we're talking about the same story,
yeah, this was a Delta blues guy. This was
take your pick. Robert Johnson, Blind Willie Johnson, Willie Dixon. They stole from all of those guys.
Yeah.
Even Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which is a song that I love off of Led Zeppelin 1. They kind of stole from, the popular version before then was from Joan Baez, but she didn't even write it. But they blatantly took that. And, look, there's nothing wrong with having influences from other artists or whatnot. But they blatantly ripped off riffs, melodies, and whatnot, and just blatantly did not give anybody credit for it until they were litigated against.
Even lyrics at times.
Oh yeah,
they didn't hide from taking any lyrics, which is that brings me to where do I have this? Okay, when the levee breaks. When the Levee Breaks is one of those songs. That's actually the best song on that album, if you ask me. Led Zeppelin 3, right?
No, it's off of 4, isn't it?
Is it 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4.
The Untitled album, the first Untitled album?
The Black Album, or some people call it the Dark Album.
Yeah.
So when the Levee Breaks was recorded by Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie in 1929, right? So he actually gave Memphis Minnie a writing credit, Robert Plant did, because he took the whole song, right? Basically took the whole song.
When did he give her credit?
That's a question I don't have an answer to. But so the thing there was the thing about when the levee breaks, and I thought I found this interesting. So that drum beat at the beginning, there's so many rumors about that drum beat. So,
Wait, could you do that drum? Could you do that drum beat one more time?
Don't make me do the fake harmonica, please. So what happens is that whole sound thing becomes a thing of its own. That whole intro becomes a thing of its own. It takes on a life of its own. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago. It May Get Loud with the Jimmy Page, Jack Black, Edge, guitar documentary.
Jack White.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who did I say?
Jack Black.
Yeah, well, he's a guitar player too.
Yeah, he's a good guitar player.
He
actually,
is a good guitar player. Yeah. So they bring him back to Headley Ridge, where they recorded that.
Yeah.
And he walks in the lobby, and it's like set up like the place is set up like a hotel. Like you go up the stairs, there's a level, then you go up another level, and you go up another level. And Jimmy Page is like, "Oh, this would be great." So the story goes, let's record in here. Let's do when the levee breaks in here. So, he points up. He goes, we set up a mic here. We set up a mic there. First of all, Jimmy Page never set up a fucking mic. At that point in their career. So the story is the echo was so good. The echo was so, powerful that what you hear at the beginning of When the Levee Breaks is a natural echo, which is impossible to get that echo. They set a microphone up on the second level and the third level, which was unique. But they actually had an echo machine. I forget what the name of the box was back then. Actually, Jimmy Page had bought this thing. And The engineer is the one that came up with all that. He's the one that tuned it in. I guess they just totally compressed it, like 100% compressed, and they came out with that sound. People were always thinking, oh, Headley Ridge, they said, oh, that was at Anton LaVey's house. It's amazing how some songs take on a life of their own. In that particular song, and that song it's an interesting song where the drum is actually the what do you call it? It's the whole rhythm of the song. It's the break. It's the whole song. What's the word I'm looking for? When you have a song, the melody, it's the consistent throughout the whole song. I don't know.
I think the melody's fine. The rhythm, the beat.
Nah, it's something else, but it carries through the whole song, and then you hear Robert Plant's harmonica playing. It's like, where the hell did that come from? Like, that dude was a great harmonica player.
He was a good harmonica, player, but I mean, he's no Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger can really play. The harmonica fill on that song is good, but it's kind of basic stuff. But it's amplified. It's amplified and it's made really heavy.
Now he gets into it. He digs it. It's the tempo. I think that's what one of our viewers just chatted in, the tempo, I think, of the song. But it's one of those rare. The drum is where Jimmy Page actually sucked his ego up and let something else drive the song instead of his guitaring. So what do you got? Tell me something.
So before we get too far away from it, just so people that are listening understand, because we throw out the whole thing about them, being plagiarists, and there were a lot of people that did that back in the day. There are people that have accused, Bob Dylan of plagiarizing certain things from poetry books or from other artists. The Beatles were sued for plagiarism a couple of times. George Harrison was sued for copyright infringement for My Sweet Lord. The melody was kind of ripped off.
That was absolutely. That was a blatant ripoff. That was
from the Shirelles. But I have, at least a partial list here. So Babe, I'm Going to Leave You was actually a song written by Ann Breeden that was popularized by Joan Baez. You Shook Me was a song written for Muddy Waters that was actually written by Willie Dixon. Dazed and Confused, and this might be the one that you were actually making reference to. Hold on a second. My computer's about to die.
Actually, Dazed and Confused, did you know it was originally called I'm Confused? And didn't the Yardbirds do that?
Well, so Page actually had Dazed and Confused when
or I Feel Confused
when he was in the Yardbirds.
But it was called something else. It was like I Feel Confused or I'm So Confused.
I don't know what the hell's going on here.
And actually, getting back to when the levee breaks, if you go and listen to Coda, there's the original version of When the Levee Breaks. It was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Thank God they revisited it.
Scott.
What, do you have technical difficulties?
Yeah, you might lose me.
Oh, Jack, I'll never lose you.
Man, what the hell's going on here?
I can still see you. Well, let me see. I'll just carry on right here. So, while Jack adjusts and this is the beauty of live streaming, right? Well, this is the beauty of it.
I'll keep talking while I'm trying to figure it out.
I'm going to pull out a Did You Know? So did you know that Jimmy Page, to keep the record companies from meddling into their albums, their first few albums, he actually he financed Led Zeppelin's self-titled album just to keep the record companies out of his hair, so to speak, out of their hair. How you doing? You plugged in?
Not yet. For whatever reason, it ain't working, Scotty boy. It ain't working. Captain, you've got no power.
Okay, so let's go into another Did You Know? This is on the fly. Robert Plant recorded Presence, the album Presence, in a wheelchair.
He did. So
And on crutches.
you're absolutely right. So the story of Presence, and I know this one. So the story of Presence was that they were actually supposed to go on tour. And before they were going on tour, they were all in like Europe and a bunch of different places.
This is 77.
Robert Plant was on the Greek islands with his son, Jimmy Page's son, and his wife at the time, and nobody really knows what happened. But his car basically went off the road, and they ended up hitting a tree. He actually thought his wife was dead. She was conked out. They ended up in a lousy, Greek hospital. He had a broken hip. He had a broken leg. He was absolutely a mess.
Broke his elbow too.
What's that?
He broke his elbow too.
Yeah, they weren't sure that he was actually going to be able to walk again. They were, the future of Led Zeppelin was somewhat uncertain. So the tour obviously was canceled. So instead, they decided to make what would become Presence, their lowest selling album, up to that point, aside from the abominable, terrible, horrible, and we can argue about this one, is The Song Remains the Same. That live record is just awful. I'm sorry. But
I like the Dazed and Confused. I like the movie. The movie was good. It's kind of trippy.
Boring. Boring.
I guess. It depends on how old you were when you saw it and what condition you were in. And was it a midnight movie or what was it when you saw it? Right.
But getting back to, to Presence, no acoustic guitars on that record, no keyboards on that record, really strangely enough, no presence of John Paul Jones' involvement, other than playing on the record. He didn't do a lot of arranging and a lot of writing. That album was basically written by, Jimmy Page, and then Robert Plant obviously came in and helped with the lyrics, but they were actually trying to, get back to a heavier sound. The album was rushed, and there was a lot of unhappiness. Robert Plant was not happy about making the record. He, as you said, was in a wheelchair for the recording of it. In my opinion, there's two good songs on that record, which is Achilles' Last Stand, which is over 10 minutes long. Talk about excess, and then. What's the other song that I like on it? Nobody's Fault But Mine.
Right.
That they ripped off. Actually, I think one of the coolest things and the most disappointing thing about, like, when I first bought Presents, if you remember the album cover, it had that family sitting around with
the symbol. So
yeah, they had them sitting around the little black statue, and I thought it was going to be a concept album, and it is by far not a concept album. That record is thrown together.
It's got some. Achilles' Last Stand, For Your Life, Royal Orleans, Nobody's Fault But Mine, Candy Store Rocks a Throwaway, Hearts On for Nowhere Throwaway, and T for One. So there's 7 songs on it. Right, which says a lot right there, because how many albums back then only had 7 songs? So it was a throw together album to get a tour on, right? So during that tour, they were notoriously hateful toward the media. They didn't like them, right? So they decided during the 77 tour of Presence that to burnish that reputation for notoriously they didn't like the media. They allowed a handful of reporters to see the shows and ask them questions, though there were rules, and this handful of reporters that got to go with them, these were the rules. Okay, 1, never talk to anyone in the band unless they first talk to you. 1A. Do not make any sort of eye contact with John Bonham. This is for your own safety. This is real. They really did this. Rule number 2, do not talk to Peter Grant or the tour manager, Richard Cole, for any reason. Number 3, keep your cassette player turned off at all times unless conducting an interview. And 4, never ask questions about anything other than music. And 5, most importantly, understand this: the band will read what is written about them. The band does not like the press, nor do they trust them. That was handed to each reporter,
Well,
journalist.
that is overblown ego, and that's not uncommon. So I have a friend of mine that is like the head of operations for the Boston Garden, and she told me this story that you can pretty much drive your tour bus right into the Boston Garden, and somebody came up when Madonna was playing there and said that when she got off the bus, everybody had to kind of turn away from her. If somebody made eye contact with her, she was going to leave. She was going to refuse to do the show. Like, get the fuck over yourself, will you, man? Get over yourself, you old hag.
Yeah. So, what else? Let me see. Again, I think John Paul Jones is so under appreciated in the Led Zeppelin legacy for his contributions to that band.
Definitely overshadowed, and part of it is
I think he liked it like that too. He was a low key guy.
Look, you kind of get what you hope to get, and what he wanted to make his music. He didn't necessarily want to be this big loud rock star, and you know what, he would have lost anyway. Jimmy Page, huge presence. Robert Plant, huge presence. Bonzo, big presence. He was the quiet guy,
Yeah.
But what I think was a real shame was when Page and Plant got together. I think it was in like '95, and they were really going out to do kind of like the acoustic versions or the different arrangements of Zeppelin songs. They didn't even ask him to go out.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't even ask him to go out.
You know what I hate about Led Zeppelin, though? I really hate it.
All the synthesizers?
Stairway to Heaven. Good Lord. It's an 8th grader's idea of a fantasy. Are you fucking playing that? Really? The simplest, stupidest intro to a song that people think is so glorious and fabulous.
Hey, you
if I was next to you right now, no, listen to me. If I was next to you right now, I would pull a fucking Blutowski and smash that guitar.
Dude, you just hate Led Zeppelin because when it was played at the Winthrop Junior High dances, you were up in the bleachers all by yourself, crying.
Yeah, and that was it. That was made Led Zeppelin. Even Robert Plant doesn't like Stairway to Heaven. Robert Plant doesn't.
How can you not like Stairway to Heaven? Come on, it's anthemic, And I'll tell you, it's a long song and it's been overplayed to death. But there are still times where I listen to that song where I get chills listening to Jimmy Page's guitar solo.
Nah, Robert Plant even said he hates Stairway to Heaven. He's actually quoted as saying, "There's nothing special about that song at all." He said he considered it a nice, pleasant, well-meaning, naive little song that wouldn't be nearly as popular if its lyrics weren't so vogue and ambiguous. It's exactly what he said about it. And you know what else I fucking hate about that song is you get these college students, these college students, and they do their thesis in music, music theory. And I'm going to do my thesis on Stairway to Heaven. And basically, what Robert Plant really meant was the systemic patriarchy in the Middle Earth between the hobbits, and that there was no female hobbits except there was one. And this is what I read into the lyrics. The Frodo Baggins had a wife named Bimbo Baggins, and she cheated on him with another hobbit named Shitbag Baggins, and they had a kid named I Don't Give a Shit Baggins, who ended up being an oppressor to the hobbit patriarchy. And Stairway to Heaven was Robert Plant reading the fucking Hobbit books. Okay. And he wrote some lyrics. And
Lord of the Rings.
And every fucking year from fucking 1970 something to 1980 something for 10, 15 fucking years. Every radio station in the country, we were the greatest 10 songs of the decade or the last. And fucking Stairway to Heaven always came in fucking first place because everybody thinks Stairway to Heaven was such a great fucking song, and it's not. It's just not. Okay, it's a song. It's got a good guitar solo, and that's all there is to it. Okay, what?
So, see that's where I think the band goes like way off the rails. I mean, the first couple of albums, they were a blues band. I mean, they played a lot of heavy blues, and then they turned into a prog band for a little while.
Yeah, and Stairway to Heaven what's a better song than Stairway to Heaven? Freebird. Okay. Freebird is a better song than Stairway to Heaven. It means something. The lyrics mean something. The guitars mean something. The drumming means something. There's no fucking flutes in there. And there's no ding, 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 ding. Nah, no acoustic in there. Freebird is a better song than Stairway to Heaven. But because it's Led Zeppelin did the greatest band in the world, but it's got Stairway to Heaven, greatest song in the world. Yeah.
Dude, let your feelings out. Turn around and tip that pinball machine over.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to say I feel better. I've been dying to get that off my chest for years.
Yeah.
So, give me a list. What are your 10 favorite Led Zeppelin songs?
Yeah, I'm looking at my top 10 list, and there's actually 12 songs on it, but I'll read 10.
That's I could have said something, but I'll leave it alone.
Easy. All right, so I'll so these aren't really in order, but this is the way that they came
somewhat
to me.
Order, yeah.
So maybe they are. So I'll start at 10. Friends off of Led Zeppelin 3. I think underrated, great song. How Many More Times? Number 9.
Friends. Wait. Did you just say Friends? Really?
Friends.
Are you like trying to be the guy that's like different? I'm going to be different and pick the song that nobody fucking likes or even knows exists. Are you going to be that guy?
You probably bring up a good point. If I look at most of my list, it's all the stuff that I haven't heard 18 million fucking times. That's one of the problems that I have with Led Zeppelin is they weren't overrated. They were overplayed.
You know what the thing I found interesting about Led Zeppelin? I really had a hard time putting songs to albums because they all kind of meshed together after a while. Probably from being overplayed. Like, yeah. I'd listen to a song and I'd be like, wait, was that off of Physical Graffiti or Houses of the Holy? What? I don't know. So, okay, sorry to interrupt. So, Friends.
Against
off the
of
Green
Led
guy.
Zeppelin 3.
Right.
How Many More Times? When the Levee Breaks. Gallows Pole, In the Light, off of Physical Graffiti, which is, look, just a lot of memories of being down Greg Porter's basement or somebody's basement with the Klipsch or the Bose 901s cranked out in a big hazy fog of whatever was being smoked in those rooms. Big, long introduction, but really heavy and really cool and great keyboards by John Paul Jones. The Immigrant Song. Love the Immigrant Song. Hate the song that's on the other side of it. That was the 45, but we can talk about that in a second. Number 4, Your Time Is Gonna Come, off of Led Zeppelin 1. The song remains the same. Thank You. And my number 1 is Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You.
Oh, Jesus.
What's your fucking problem? What's wrong with
That's your
that
number
list?
1?
Really? I love that song. I've always loved that song.
Oh my God. Was this some sort of first kiss or first thing involved with that? I love how different we are.
Oh, we're different, all right, except for our heads. You're different, all right. All right, so go ahead. Let's hear it.
Okay. Number 10 from Houses of the Holy, the Rain song. Like that song.
That was my number 12.
So number 9, and it's kind of interesting. I found myself with a trend on this because they kind of have a similar openings. Is 10 Years Gone off of Physical Graffiti, right? They have that slow build, right? Number 8, In the Evening, through the outdoor. Just a slamming song from, just one of those great songs. Number 7 from Physical Graffiti, In the Light.
All right.
No,
You were probably
great
at the
song.
same parties I was at.
Isn't there synthesizer in that? Isn't there synth in the light?
There are definitely keyboards in that song. I'm not sure that I would call them synthesizers. John Paul Jones is too refined of a musician to sink down to the level of playing a synthesizer.
You're an anti-synthite who likes the Go-Go's. Anyways.
Dude, you love the synthesizer.
I do.
You know what? You're Cynthy Lauper.
Oh, Jesus. Did you
You
really
wanna
just
have
say
fun.
that? Did you really just say that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
It was a cheesy joke. Like
That's
the
cheese.
synthesizer.
We left cheese after last week's show. Okay, so getting back to it. Number 7 was In the Light from Physical Graffiti. Number 6 from Presence, Nobody's Fault But Mine. Right? Number 5 from Led Zeppelin 2, I Still Love. Well, this was an interesting thing. Whole Lot of Love. So I love the
Stolen.
song. Huh?
It's another stolen song.
It's okay. I loved it. Then I hated it. I got so sick of hating it. But I know you and everybody listening has gone through this with at least one song where you're driving in your car and this song comes on you've heard 10,000 times, and all of a sudden you kind of really listen to it again. And you start getting a new appreciation for it, right? You know what I'm talking about?
So
Like
you
you
know,
start
if you-
going, this song is actually good again. Like I like this song again.
yeah.
Because
Sometimes
after a while you stop
sometimes,
listening.
sometimes you got to get away from them for a little bit.
And
But
a Whole Lot of Love, it's just, and it doesn't bring back like the old memory. It's just, I just start listening. I go, the arrangement of it, the left to rights, how it jumps around, how it was produced, just a great song.
There's one part of Whole Lot of Love that I love in particular. So there's that whole interlude in the middle, and they go into kind of the guitar solo, and then the band just all kicks in.
Yeah.
That part is just magic when they all kick in.
Yep.
And you know what? I have a love-hate relationship with that song, and I go back and forth, and I get bored with it, and then I find it again. But at the end,
It's a great song,
Robert Plant, way down inside, like, okay.
Yeah. So, number 4 is the Immigrant Song from Led Zeppelin 3. Now, what the word I was looking for earlier, and it's the same as this. When the levee breaks is the riff. The riff is the drums in that song. The drum carries that whole song, just like in Immigrant Song. I think John Paul Jones is driving that one. Dun, 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 dun. Heavy bass all the way through. And again, that was kind of a moment that Jimmy Page was either out, getting a drink, and they snuck that in because he's not really into letting other people get, a little fame on the song. Okay, so that's number 3. I think this song is like the greatest entrance song ever. If you're a fighter, if you're a wrestler, this is, I think, probably the greatest entrance song. From Physical Graffiti, The Rover. I love that whole the intro to that song, right?
Yep.
Number 2, When the Levee Breaks. Best song on that album. It's the last song. Mm-hmm. It's totally different than everything else on that album. Totally different than anything else on that album. And I just think it was a great song. And my number 1, probably one of the greatest. Huh?
Please don't say it.
What do you think it's going to be?
I just go ahead.
No, it's this song is probably one of the best side 1 first songs of all time. You want to talk about a better way to start a side 1, multi guitars, total jam from start to finish, and it's Achilles' Last Stand. That is my favorite Zeppelin song.
six or seven different guitars on that.
There's multi guitars. It's unbelievable, and that's one of those songs where if they ever played it in concert, it kind of sounds hollow, just like when the Levee breaks. If you heard it, if they played it in concert, that kick wasn't there, that echo wasn't there. So there's kind of
couldn't replicate it. Couldn't replicate it live.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting observation of our list. No Stairway to Heaven.
Good.
No good times, bad times. No good times.
Did I mention I fucking hate Stairway to Heaven? Did I mention that?
Yeah. Okay. No good times, bad times.
Good.
No Misty Mountain Hop. No Heartbreaker. No Livin' Lovin' Maid. A lot of the stuff that's played all the time, we didn't pick. We picked a lot of deep tracks. And I'll tell you, one of the other ones that we didn't pick is probably in most people's top 3 is Cashmere.
Cashmere is a great song. You know what else?
Cashmere is an okay song.
It's my number 11 song, if it was the top 11, would have been Communication Breakdown.
Another great song off a Led Zeppelin one. But, my issue with Cashmere is it doesn't go anywhere. It's just...
You know what my introduction to Cashmere was? The Channel 56 8 o'clock movie when we were growing up. Channel 56, the UHF channel in Boston. The intro to their 8 o'clock movie or 10 o'clock movie was Cashmere. Yeah. And I didn't know that. I was just a little Chuck.
Yeah. Although I will absolutely concede that the live record that they put out from the one show that they did in England in 2007, that live version of Cashmere is fantastic. It's just big and heavy, and the technology was there to really kind of pull it off live.
Dazed and Confused or Cashmere? Which one you like better?
I think I would have to go with Dazed and Confused because I like the guitar solo.
I think the best version of Dazed and Confused was off of the movie that you hated. That was so boring.
So that song on that soundtrack takes up a whole side.
But it's brilliant.
It is brilliantly snoozable. It sucks.
But did you say it was brilliantly snoozable?
Copywritten Jack Calabrese 2021.
Pick up your mic and just drop it because I don't even have a comeback for that one. It was brilliantly snoozable.
And what kind of idiots were we? Where we used to, be half wasted and we would trek into either Boston or Cambridge to go see the midnight showing of that. I'd be asleep in 15 minutes. That is not a good movie, and it's not a good record.
Now, Led Zeppelin. This fucking werewolf gangster with the Tommy gun, that made no sense at all. You had to be on the acid.
Those fantasy scenes. Come on, give me a fucking break, man.
Robin Plant with the cape and the sword.
Terrible, overblown, bombastic, huge ego, too much money, too much drugs. Forget about that movie. Is horrible.
Okay, West Side Story or The Song Remains the Same?
Not even close. West Side Story.
Get out of here.
Absolutely.
Get out of here. West Side Story. I used to think West Side Story was like this cool movie, right? When I was a kid, because they showed it once a year on ABC, right?
It's a classic.
I'd watch it, and everyone thinks they're the Jets or the Sharks. Then I grew up, and then I watched it one night, and I was like, these guys are a little...
No. West Side Story is a much better music.
They're not as tough as I thought they were. They're kind of dancing a lot, and they're kind of not really masculine.
Wait, don't you remember when we used to dance through the center?
Yeah.
When
I was a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing. And then I see the fight is actually a dance. Like, what the hell? Yeah.
Even with all of that, West Side Story is a much better movie than The Song Remains the Same. The Song Remains the Same was horrible.
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 Get out of here.
Just terrible. Just there's not. And the shame of it is Led Zeppelin could be a really good live band. I've known a couple of people that have had the opportunity to see them like in their prime, like 3 or 4 people, and they all said the same thing. If you caught them on a good night, they were brilliant, but if you caught them when they were off, they were awful.
Yeah,
and it just so happened that one of the nights they were awful, they actually filmed them and recorded The Song Remains the Same. It was so bad that they had to come up with these lame fantasy sequences because they didn't have enough interesting things on stage to carry that fucking movie.
Okay. All right. Let's transition into the final segment of the show, sponsored by Great White Hot Sauce. The hot sauce that bites. Find it at www.trygreatwhite.com.
Bites almost as much as the song remains the same.
What do you got and what's new? What do you got?
So I ordered one record today. I ordered the new Black Keys record, which is those guys are great. They put out a lot of music. But the one that I can show today, I actually got the box set, which is called Total Assault. This is the MC5, the Motor City 5, that has the 3 vinyl releases, Kick Out the Jams, Back in the USA, and High Time. This is a great record.
Some originators right there, buddy.
A great record. There isn't a song on here that's 17 minutes long, you over-egoed young girl, droopy loving.
Yeah. As long as they're not
slapping.
these 2-minute 3 riff songs like the Ramones, please.
Look, at the end of the day, Led Zeppelin were a historic, amazing band, but not infallible. They didn't get everything right.
Yeah. So I went out and downloaded. I'm going to actually put up the album cover for the viewers. From 2003, the Dandy Warhols, Welcome to the Monkey House. Very interesting group, the Dandy Warhols. If you ever want to watch a great rock doc, right? Watch the movie called Dig, D-I-G. It's a documentary about the Dandy Warhols going on tour and basically the Brian Jonestown Massacre kind of going on tour at the same time, and they kind of collide throughout the documentary, and it's totally insane. It's insane. But the album, Welcome to the Monkey House, it's pretty unique sound. It's got kind of a psychedelic sound to it. Then all of a sudden, there's kind of a Love and Rockets kind of sound to it. They're a very unique group. They're one of those groups that didn't really hit big in the States, but they're an American band that's huge over in Europe. There's those bands that like Tito and Tarantula. They're not big in the States. They were, Quentin Tarantino threw them into, their songs into Dusk Till Dawn. But over in Europe, they're constantly touring, So that's what I got. And yes, you're right. At the end of the day, Led Zeppelin is Led Zeppelin.
So Renee thinks we're being way too hard on them.
No, we're not. We're telling the truth. We're telling the truth. Yeah. I mean, look at Renee is a Rolling Stones fan, right? My friend Renee is a Rolling Stones. She's a Rolling Stones goddess, okay? Because I love Renee.
I love Renee even more.
Keith Richards even said, as if she heard me earlier in the show, Keith Richards even said that Led Zeppelin wasn't that good as a band. All right, so she can argue with Keith Richards over that.
In all fairness, I don't think Keith Richards had a love for Van Halen. I don't think he had a love for a lot of bands. Keith Richards' view of music and what he really liked was really narrow. So and you know what, Led Zeppelin.
I think
you actually made a very good point at the beginning that they were a confused band. I think at some point they really kind of lost their way. They got away from being a blues-based, heavy rock band, and they turned into kind of a proggy band. And I think that
they're a teenagers band, really, if you think about it.
I think there's a little bit of burnout. I think the constant touring. They had a slew of bad luck. I mean, Robert Plant losing his son in the accident, and obviously John Bonham, dying. I mean, there was a lot of tragedy in that band as well.
And they came in right at the right time too. The 70s was absolute. The wall just fell down, and they all came charging in, and Led Zeppelin was leading the way.
Here's the big question. So if you think about the last album that they put out, as a band, aside from the outtakes, the Coda record. So the last album that they put out was In Through the Outdoor, right?
Yeah.
And even Zeppelin fans struggle with that record. Too much synthesizer on it. But Fool in the Rain, All of My Love. There's a band that was in transition, maybe trying to keep up with the times a little bit. It would be interesting to see how Led Zeppelin's legacy would have endured had they been able to carry on. Because I got to tell you, I mean, if you think about like the solo stuff, and I get it, they weren't a unit anymore. But Page went on to do The Firm with Paul Rodgers, and Robert Plant went on to have a hugely successful, solo career. But I don't think that either of those guys really had great albums that they put out. I think there were a couple of great songs here and there.
I think Robert Plant had what, 2 good albums with the Honey Drifters,
Honey Drippers,
whatever they were.
And,
yeah.
and by the way, Jimmy Page was on that.
Yeah, and they were good. They were good summer albums. I just remember them hearing Robert Plant's, the 2 or 3 songs that he had off those albums. I wouldn't say he had a huge. Robert Plant is actually a very disappointing person to see in concert if you don't know Robert Plant, because Robert Plant is like Morrissey. He doesn't like doing the oldie stuff. He'd rather talk about his stuff with Alison Krauss than he would with Led Zeppelin. He's like, Led Zeppelin was another time in my life. And I know people that have gone to see him, and they're like, where's Led Zeppelin?
That gives you an indication as to why he doesn't do a lot of those songs. He can't do them anymore.
No.
He doesn't have the vocal range anymore.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, I mean, how old is Robert Plant? I mean, all of us, our voices change and they evolve, and you're not able to hit those notes. You don't have the vocal range that you did when you were a young man. And he's probably really smart to say, like when they got together in 2007, at the O2 Arena in London, that was a one-off show, and it was incredible. And Page and John Bonham's son and John Paul Jones, they wanted to go on tour. They wanted to bring it to America. And I think that Plant was smart enough to recognize that I don't think I can do this night after night. I don't think I can do these songs and hit these high notes and put this much emphasis and really be impactful for a whole tour. I think he had enough energy and they did enough rehearsal and he's able to rest his voice long enough that he knew he could really pull off one show. And Robert Plant, in all fairness, on a lot of his tours, he's pulled out, Zeppelin songs. He may have actually done, different arrangements, or the band actually played in a lower key so he could actually hit those notes.
Yeah. But I think once he started working with Alison Krauss, he stopped. And I think that's where I probably should have been a little more specific. When he started working with her, he didn't go back to doing Zeppelin stuff. He did. He was out there doing, again, when he was with the Honey Drippers or whatever. I'm sure when he toured, he did Zeppelin songs. And
He did.
Page and Plant went out, like 20 years ago? They were touring together.
I think they toured in 95. I'll tell you that the most, at least the one that I saw, I think that the best live collection of Led Zeppelin songs was when Jimmy Page went out on tour with the Black Crowes.
Wow.
That is, if you have an opportunity, for those of you that are listening, download that one, go on to Spotify. You will be amazed at how tight and how great that band sounds with Jimmy Page playing with them. But, the Robinson boys, they really do those songs justice.
Oh, I'll believe you. All right, buddy, we rolled up on an hour. Another good show. Hang on. We'll chat for a minute after the show. He's gonna play me out. Here we go. I will John Belushi that fucking guitar. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, listen. Thank you for listening. To the viewers, thank you for watching. Thank you for your participation. This podcast will be published by Thursday. Although I shouldn't say that because now I'm locked into it. It'll be on all podcast platforms. Find it, download it, like it, subscribe to it. Boy. So, like I was saying, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week. We don't really know what the topic will be because Jack's playing the guitar and he's really irritating me right now. He's in just one of those things. All right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. And remember, milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com. Email us. Tell us what you think. Say hello. milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com. Give us show suggestions. We're listening. Good night.